Present.
Commissioner Grace? Present. Commissioner Lozey?
Present.
And Commissioner Trahan?
Present. Okay, do the roll call. Previous minutes, July 18th.
Motion to approve. Second.
All's in favor? Aye. You don't need a roll call for that, right? The previous
Yeah.
minutes. Okay, project updates, treatment, 20-year contract, monthly report.
I'll take it. Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman. On July 6th, the DEP has approved the capital improvement plan for the work at the wastewater treatment plant. And on July 22nd, they approved the plan and specifications for the 11 remote pump stations. So all the design work and specifications are completed. They've been approved. The project is transitioning into the construction phase. For the month of July, the plant averaged 15 MGD. That's what we treated, 15 MGD. That's a day. Last month we did 16.92, which were a little lower. And the reason for that is the rainfall for the month of June was 2.21 at the meter at the plant. It was down to 0.63 at the wastewater plant. I think Rick has a meter up at the water plant. I think they were 0.85. The percent removal for BOD was 94%. The removal for suspended solids was 96%. So we are in compliance with all state and federal regulations. And that's the update for the wastewater plant.
Okay. Anybody got any questions? Okay, next, water treatment plant, monthly report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Water and Sewer Commission is in compliance with all federal and state drinking water regulations. 9 of the 10 contract full-time positions at the water treatment plant are currently filled. There is an open operator position. Buoy Water is currently in the process of finding a replacement. They have 2 operators right now that have a grade 2 license. They have to take a class in the fall. It's the next earliest one they could get to. And after that class, they can both test for the grade 3, which we need to operate the water treatment plant, which is a grade 4 plant. On the water supply capacity, as of yesterday, was at 59%. The average for this time of year was 72%. Now in the package, there's a memo that I prepared for Dan O'Neill regarding the current situation with the water supply. We try to take a proactive approach on asking for voluntary curtailment from the residents at this time. Normally, according to our drought management plan, when the reservoir capacity hits 55%, we ask for voluntary curtailment. But this summer has been so dry, and as you can tell, most of it, there's been a lot of articles in the newspapers and as well as on the news and TV that every community around us is in a water ban. But since we have a pretty strong reservoir system, we're a little bit behind that curve. But just a real quick summary is that from March to July, we've had 9.51 inches per rain. The 30-year average that I've measured at the water treatment plant is 19.25. So we're less than half the rain there. The reservoir capacities have been dropping about 2% every week. And so we think it's a good time to get the word out there that the residents, if they could, to start tailing back on the water. And we've also reached out to the city as far as the islands and the grasses to cut back on the water there. Splash pads, however, where the kids need to be cool, they can run at least until Labor Day at this time. But we're asking for not to water the grass anymore. Grass, if this type of drought, it turns dormant, it'll bounce back when we get wet weather again.
So now how are we gonna do that? Are we gonna do like a mailing to the whole city, or do you do it in the paper, and like, how do you get it out?
A newspaper ad plus on our website. And the word usually gets around pretty good as soon as someone sees it in the paper, and in the past it's worked pretty well. They start seeing their neighbors and they go over and tell them. It'll be on our website as well. And we've already, Anthony and I have talked to Andy Hall at the DPW and asked him to cut back water on the grasses in the gardens, not the splash pad. And we will, the same thing probably for the golf course, it's in the memo. Obviously the greens have to have special attention, but the fairways, if they could cut back water on the fairways. The sun angle already has cut back a lot. The harshest 3 months is from May 5th to August 5th, as far as the solar angle. And so now, the grasses should withstand. If the weather changes, we get wetter, then we can look at some
They can
changes.
turn it
But
back on.
it's gonna take a while for the reservoirs to recover from this. And the last real bad drought we had was 2016, where we hit in the high 30s in the late fall, and it takes a while to recover. So even if we get like 2 or 3 inches this week, by the time the rivers get charged again and we can start moving water, you know, there's a pretty good delay.
What percentage do you get down to before it's mandatory?
Well, for our plan, we have enforced bans at 45. We have limited restrictions at 50 and voluntary at 55.
Right.
At 25%, it's a declared emergency.
Okay.
But like I said, this drought has been harsh since March.
Yeah.
Usually if we have like a dry July, or even like a June, it's not terrible unless it continues, but this,
Yeah, this
we
has been
noticed
so
it
many
in
months.
March.
Yeah.
We hit 86% at the end of March, where we should be, and right around that time, the rainfall is pretty much cut off.
Yeah, just to put in historical perspective, Rick's been tracking this for about 25 years. The .85 number I mentioned earlier is the lowest we've had in July. And it's very unpredictable because the highest we've had in July, which was 11.49, was last year. So it's strange how it just kind of from year to year.
One extreme to the other.
Yeah, year to year. Fortunately, we have the 4 reservoirs, and we've got a really good system there in place. But and Rick does a great job maintaining the water. But sometimes it's just from year to year it can be that much bigger difference.
Yeah, they were just saying on the radio last July was the wettest July.
Yeah,
in history,
and
this
that's
July
what
was
it's
the
done.
hottest.
So we had, like I said, 11.49 inches last year, and now we've only got less than an inch this year.
Anybody else got any questions?
Sorry, which newspaper does that ad run in?
Lynn item.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, thank you.
Okay, next CSO update.
I'll take that,
Okay.
Chairman. Ron, thank you. So Phase 1, the Commission's contractor, PGOso and Son, is nearly complete with the work. They've completed all the paving, sidewalk, curb restoration. There's only punch list items remaining. We had to have a substantial completion by August 11th of 2022. We've reached that, so that project is, in a sense, complete. Phase 2, PGOso has been installing the force main. They began construction, as I mentioned last meeting, on the 60-inch culvert and riprap and dissipator at the outfall. And they're about 70% complete. They're moving rather quickly on that. The estimated completion time for that was December 2022. It looks like they're going to probably be there by October 2022, so they're moving pretty well there. The Phase 3 is the construction of the pump station. Methuen Construction has begun preliminary site preparation work. They've completed that work. They're moving into the next phase, which is to drive the piles in for the foundation. We ran into some contaminated soils, some asbestos, which slowed them down. They had to remove the asbestos. It was old roof shingles that had asbestos, so that slowed them down a little bit. But we're still at about 13%. I had mentioned last meeting we were at 13%. We're still there because of that removal had to take place before they started the piles. And that's the update.
Anybody, any questions on anything? Okay, Kings Beach update.
So Kings Beach update is moving along. I have Eric Kelly from Environmental Partners here with us to give us an update. Eric?
Yep, so we've completed the preliminary and follow-up detail investigations of the subcatchment areas, and now we're in the process of planning the follow-up work that comes out of that. So in some cases that included detailed CCTV inspections to see what the condition of the drainage network is. Usually we were using evidence of very elevated bacteria levels or other pharmaceutical products as to places we needed to go find out how many pipes do we have coming into what should essentially be a relatively dry system during dry weather conditions. So far we've only identified one direct connection. It was a property off Mariana. that is slated to get disconnected as early as next week. That was done through some supplemental dye testing and everything. Turns out it was just a property that was much further from the actual old sewer than the ones that were suspect. So that's getting disconnected next week. Those are the kind of things the program's supposed to find if you can get lucky enough to have the obvious evidence that we found. We're doing follow-up work in other places where there was no smoking gun during the initial inspection. So now we're going to be doing work along Chestnut down in the Seymour Ave area. Are going to follow up with additional TV inspection, dye testing, and potentially smoke testing to try and find connected properties. And then we're working up detailed plans for follow-up CCTV work in other areas where the levels weren't quite as high as those three I just mentioned, but still high enough that there might be suspects connections out in the system. So that's going to continue us until September. And then if we have at that point, then we'll be chasing kind of the minor items where they're just slightly elevated numbers so we can get more information on those. But so far, the three hotspots were Chestnut, Seymour, and Mariana, and one of them proved out. The other two we don't have a direct connection that's been identified yet, but we're not done with the investigations.
Okay. Now, when you say disconnect, like when you found a Mariana, who do we do that?
Yeah,
Or so we actually take care of it so we know it got done?
So just if I can explore Mariana a little bit further. This was a sewer line that we changed over to a drain. So when the contractor was disconnecting all the properties, they went in front of every property and disconnected it. The reason why this was missed is this one came off of Wayne Ave. It was a house that was not on the street, sat back off a different street, and so they would never have seen it because they would never have gone to looking for a Wayne Ave coming into the pipe. So this pipe then went from a sewer to a drain in the contract, and that's why it got missed. But you know, everybody's been putting our heads together and looking at old plans and trying to see, you know, what we had dye tested every home on that street, checked all the basins, checked everything, and we couldn't find anything, but we knew something was there, and that found an old plan that showed that connection, and that happened to be it. So that's just an example of how difficult these are. They're not obvious, you know, and it's a single. It's not, as Eric alluded to, it's not a smoking gun, but it's a service. And Giosa was a contractor back then. They're in town doing the other work, so I made a call to them. I said, look, you guys missed this one. So they did a dig safe. I contacted them on Friday. They set up for dig safe 72 hours, you guys know, and they're hoping to do it this week. Get a crew over there to do it this week so we can get it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, anybody else?
Do we think that's the extent of the problem, is illicit connections, or, and the trouble of finding is they're gonna be looking at other things?
I think that's one of the components that is illicit connections. When we went through this process around, I don't know, 12 years ago, we had found six or seven was, I think, Eric?
Like that. One of them was one of the schools. So it was a pretty
One of them was one of the schools, and we had kind of gone through the whole process and found those, but you know, that sometimes the school was obviously a large one, but single-family home is just not enough flow to make a difference.
So these little minor ones we're finding aren't bringing up the numbers down.
Yeah, it's not.
Something else.
But
just to say, like this home, and so the good news is you've got a suspect source that's confirmed, and now you can remove it. But a home of that
Yeah, you're slowing it down.
Single-family home
Yeah.
might be 30,000 gallons of sewage in a year. So I mean, it's not nothing, but it wasn't like we found like a 12-unit apartment building that's going to be, you know, hundreds of.
That was dumping into it, right?
But it's like, if sampling to find it, we had to sandbag the line to even build up enough flow to even have a collectible sample, because it's one house and it's, like Rick said, it's been so dry, it's really good to go out and find sources. The problem is if it's a single source, it doesn't fill up a pipe very much, so you kind of.
So it's hard to find.
So that was the other ones that we're looking at too, were similar circumstances where there was barely any dry weather flow, but the bacteria levels in what we could collect were extremely high. So something is going on there, but if it's a 2-bedroom unit, that's just not going to send a whole lot of stuff down the system.
Down towards the system.
But it doesn't help make identifying them a little bit easier because it's so dry. The system's not getting cleaned up by any rainstorms or anything. So we're gonna try and make use of that dry weather to the best of our abilities, but if things like the dye testing proves out, like Anthony said, the team was out and dye tested every home between the two structures on Mariana, which was about 6 or 7 suspect areas. This one was just one of 12 pipes that you wouldn't know until you got the right one. It was about 125-foot lateral, which is pretty bizarre to have a sewer service that long. Basically, it's like a cross-country line.
Yeah.
It's not like the 20 feet from the curb, from the house to the center line of the street or anything, so.
Right.
But in that case, they put out notices on Chestnut. There was about 20 some odd properties that got flyered, just so we can try and check those out, and if, depending on the response rate, then we can also look back and try and do some smoke testing. That's
So now, how far are you going? Like, what are you going, what's feeding down to the beach? You have like all those streets?
Yeah, we broke up the, whatever it is, the 700 acres into 14 subcatchments, and then we broke those up further. So the follow-up work was all in that secondary level of things. So that's the ones we're chasing now, because we have a higher level of detail of. In the case of Mariana, it was a very short stretch. It was Mariana and Fisk was just the segment that was hot. We're going to be doing some work over on the Gilbert area, Seymour, Chestnut, and a few others, just where the elevated levels give us like a smaller sub area to work. So it'll be TV, dye test if we find anything of suspect. If we find no signs of structural deficiencies in the drains. Anthony's team also found there was a bunch of damaged drains down in the Seymour area, which could have also contributed to some of the problems. If you have a leaky sewer next to a leaky drain, so they're going to be TVing the sewers just to see if there's some way that it might be switching between systems.
Right.
So it might be illicit connections, damaged infrastructure, or in the case some areas you just might not be able to nail down what's really the source. It could just be pet waste and other things that could be contributing. So.
Can I have a question?
Okay.
Do you think anybody's going for the sewer systems in the streets, the catch basins?
I mean, you could still have I think more likely it could be something where you have old sewer next to old drain, and if they're both damaged, it's not unheard of that it can actually leave one system and the drain happens to be lower elevation.
So it actually seeps into the other one?
So it might not be a super strong source, but in this dry weather, if you could see it, you might be able to TV both and go, like, we've got a broken sewer pipe next to a broken drain pipe. At least you kind of get a localized repair, which is the sewer division was out repairing some of the drain on Seymour where it was very cracked clay tile pipe, which anything could have been getting through. So they did some repairs.
So you're looking after those if he brings it to your attention, Anthony?
Yeah, so this is one that, as soon as it was brought to our attention, the crews went out there and they fixed it. They relayed it. So that's the game plan.
Good.
I have a quick question. Roughly, I mean, how old are some of those clay pipes? Are they all about the same age in that area?
Some of them could probably
They're
be really old.
100 years old.
They had just changed one at my parents' house, and they determined it was like 102 years old or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was still in pretty good shape, too.
The camera operators are able to grade the pipeline segments as we go, so like, but in the case of some of the ones down in the Seymour area, we were seeing major structural issues, not imminent collapse like you're gonna create a sinkhole, but like over time, if they get enough water infiltrating and everything, you could easily get a 12-inch pipe can break and you could, make a serious pothole. So they fixed the main one, but they also had to found other deficiencies that show like soils have been getting into the pipes, so they were pretty clogged. So they were doing heavy cleaning of those before we can send the camera back in to see if anything's really going on.
My ignorance, do we have money to fix this stuff? Do we have some money from the state or the federal government for this kind of repairs?
Currently,
This is kind of small money anyways, and Anthony,
Yeah.
it's not like a major.
Right. So currently, we've been using our own personnel to address it. We have a contract for TV and cleaning that we've always had at the commission, so we're utilizing that contract to do some of this investigating work. At some point in time, we'll have to put that contract back out to bid. I think it's $50,000 on it. To get a crew out there for a day, it's about $2,500. So you only have so many days you can use them. So as soon as that runs up, we'll have to just renew that contract again.
A grant would be good too if you can get one.
A grant would be exceptional, yeah.
Right.
All grants are good grants.
Grants are good grants.
The money's flowing now, as you know, and we know.
Do we have somebody devoted to looking for grants or writing grants? How did the grants happen? Sorry.
Yeah, we don't have a grant writer here. Although we've explored getting money, Bob Fennell through the state has done. He's so part of the state allocated, I think, $100,000. Bob was for the Kings Beach that we received. We applied that to environmental partners bill for what they've been doing. So $100,000 has been paid through that state. And Bob every year goes out and
I try to get the delegation to support the earmark for the agency. We've been successful the past few years getting the last one was $150,000 earmark, and that helps upgrade some of the GIS systems that we have here and some of the technical work that has to be upgraded. So get that language right sets off the purchase order after we buy it, and the state reimburses it through the earmark program.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next, the authorization to approve the bond.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll take that.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Commissioners, in your package was a 26 supplemental resolution authorizing a ban replacement. So just as a little bit of history, last year at this time, we voted to borrow, you guys voted to borrow $7 million. The Commission's capital improvement plan is basically cash funded. So when the discussions happened a little over a year ago, coming out of COVID and emergencies and such, we secured the $7 million bond anticipation note. The rates were extremely low. By replacing the ban, we're essentially delaying deferment on what we have to repay of this money for another year. So it gives us flexibility to decide whether we keep it all, give it back. There's a lot of rules, is obviously to borrow the money, we have to provide a 3-year capital improvement plan, and there's benchmarks and spending and such like that. But basically, what we're going to be doing tonight is voting to, again, to do the 26 supplemental resolution on the Commission's bond resolution. And again, so there'd be no repayment for this, whatever amount we decided to keep, for another year before a debt service schedule is put out. So we think it's in the best interest of the ratepayers to take advantage. We won't be able to do this again. It's just certain rules that go with these ban borrowing. So
I'd like to read a motion to vote to adopt supplemental resolution. Voted that the 26th supplemental resolution under the Commission's general bond resolution adopted May 31st, 1985, as amended, is hereby adopted in substantially the form presented to this meeting, with such additions, deletions, and other changes thereto, not inconsistent therewith, as may be approved by the chairman, the executive director, or the treasurer, in accordance with such resolution prior to the delivery of any of the bond anticipation notes, 2022 Series A, referred to therein. Such additions, deletions, and other changes thereto be reflected in the official copy of such resolution on file in the records of the Commission, together with a certificate of such approving officer attesting to his approval of all such additions, deletions, and changes, provided that any material change shall be approved by the Commission.
Can you repeat that?
That was a second, Commissioner Calucci. Okay, now we're going to have our roll call on that, please.
Commissioner Salona is absent. Commissioner Calucci?
Yes.
Commissioner Grace?
Yes.
Commissioner Lozey?
Yes.
And Commissioner Trahan?
Yes.
Too bad that couldn't make sense, dude.
Okay, how about new business? Anybody got any new business? Questions? Nothing? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
In favor? So pray for rain.
$5.29.
Pray for rain.
Andy's gonna ring, right?
I can't believe our reservoir.